comincia col botto perché dobbiamo parlare di un argomento importantissimo, come diceva Federico, bisogna parlare dell'Europa sociale e lo facciamo con un grandissimo ospite, Frank Vandenbroucke, che è uno dei più grandi esperti in Europa di politiche sociali e politiche del lavoro, un rispettatissimo accademico, ma che le cose non le ha soltanto studiate, ma in passato le ha anche fatte, perché è stato ministro sia regionale che federale qui in Belgio e ancora più importante è ancora oggi un membro della SPA, che è il Partito Socialista fiammingo. Quindi è un grandissimo onore poter parlare di Europa sociale con lui e lo faremo in questo modo. Abbiamo preparato alcune domande con Federico nei giorni passati. Ci sono 5 domande che potete trovare tradotte sul tavolo lì all'ingresso e poi cercheremo di lasciare un quarto d'ora o 20 minuti per fare un po' per le vostre domande, quindi segnatele, prendete carta e penna. Frank, how is your Italian?
I can understand what you're saying.
It is better than my Dutch.
No, I don't think so.
Ok, dicevo, spero che siete svegli anche perché adesso parliamo in inglese, dobbiamo passare all'inglese. Per cui siete pronti?
Lo siamo.
Siete pronti?
Yes, we are.
Perfetto. Let's start. Okay, so first question, very tough. Well, being serious now, what we have seen from the South during the Eurozone crisis is that the survival of the Eurozone was linked to a lot of sacrifices demanded from the periphery and in exchange for very little solidarity from the core. So the first question is this the monetary union that we want, or can we imagine a better monetary union than this one? Wait.
Thank you, Ilaria and PD for this kind invitation. So the first question is, can we imagine a better monetary union? I think the answer is yes, we can imagine a better monetary union. The interesting question is, why did we not see it? Why did we see what we've seen? And I'm not going to repeat the whole history of the last 6-7 years, but I would say basically what we've seen was first an attempt to address the financial and then budgetary and then economic crisis on the basis of a set of rather simple rules saying you should reduce your deficit to that point, so rather simple economic and budgetary rules. I would say rather one size fits all, but not just one size fits all. Rules that were meant to be applied strictly by individual countries and not really based on a kind of overall economic policy you would need for the Eurozone as a whole, but addressing individual countries as if they were just acting individually. This did not work, and then luckily Draghi stepped in, and also there was behind the scenes, there was more flexibility in the application of the rules, and there was a growing awareness that there were fundamental problems with the design of the monetary union. But so indeed the first attempt has been very decisive in setting the scene. Right? So this one-size-fits-all, individual rules for individual countries, as if you could have an economic policy on that basis. Interestingly, many economists, not just people who were clearly on the left, I would say, but many economists have been arguing from the outset that this setup was, as economists would say, it was suboptimal. This is the typical economic jargon. It was suboptimal. It was absolutely conceivable to have better economic and budgetary policies. For instance, someone like Pisani-Ferry, who now is advisor to the French president, Pisani-Ferry has been on record for a number of years saying this is a poor way to coordinate our economies. You should say to Germany and other surplus countries that they have to inflate a little more, and if they have somewhat more inflation, the adjustment in the southern Eurozone countries will simply be easier. This is a very rational economic argument, and he developed economic models to show that people like Paul de Grauwen in this country and other people started saying, well, you need collective action on the problem of interest rates by means of collective action on the problem of debt. If we want to help Italy, and we are thinking back on the Monti government, if we want to help Italy, interest rates should go down rapidly and drastically. And the only way you can achieve that is by some collective action on debt, by mutualization or Eurobonds or different schemes. So, economists have been saying that this simplistic rule-based approach was suboptimal, was not really the best one can imagine. The interesting question is, why did we not see the better policies? Why did we not see a more sophisticated coordination with a more balanced adjustment, asking also some adjustment for surplus countries? Why was collective action on debt, why was that a political taboo immediately? The answer, I would say, summarizing, the answer I would say is that if you want better coordination, more intelligent coordination, if you want collective action, you need a degree of mutual trust. You need to trust each other. You must be able to say, well, we give somewhat more time to Italy, to Spain, to Portugal, to Greece. They may buy some time, and we will also do some effort in the north. But we trust each other that we will then deliver. Notably, the discussion on interest rates and on the possible mutualization of debt was a discussion completely embedded in moral hazard. If we organize collective action on debt, will then not southern countries become totally laxist again? So the essence is that we were a union of distrust. We did lack the essential trust to have a more sophisticated coordination. And then I'll stop here. I would say, fundamentally, I think, in political terms, the problem is that for a better monetary union, that would be better in delivering what it is meant to deliver, that is economic growth and stability. For a better monetary union, yes, you need to pool more sovereignty, and simultaneously you need to organize more solidarity. And you need to organize that solidarity. You cannot have solidarity by negotiations all the time. You need to organize mechanisms of solidarity. Now, pooling sovereignty traditionally has been the position of the Germans, of the pro-European Germans. They want to pool sovereignty, they want a political union, they want control. Solidarity typically has been the French position. We want more solidarity. I think the challenge for the left in Europe is to bridge those positions. Maybe there is a role for Italy here, I don't know. But the challenge is to bridge the positions and to say simultaneously, yes, we are ready for pooling somewhat more sovereignty, somewhat. We are ready to do that. But for a more sophisticated, to render possible a more sophisticated coordination and to render possible collective action on issues like that, etc. But then pooling sovereignty will only be feasible if there are also mechanisms of solidarity that are credible and that can convince people to pool sovereignty. So we have to bridge the traditional German federalist view on the EU and the French view. That, I think, is the fundamental political problem lying behind this suboptimal, to put it nicely, functioning monetary union.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. Before we move to the second question, I'll try to push you a little bit further on this. Because I agree that trust is the big barrier here. But then, as you said, there is space perhaps for Italy to relaunch this debate. But then, what can we do as a periphery to remove this barrier that can create trust? Which way should we go to prove that that is the right way and that we can deliver also at the end?
Well, that's
How do you build trust?
How do you build trust? Well, that's a difficult question because I admit it's a difficult. I have no easy answer. We might come back later in the conversation on something that I think is fundamental. You cannot build trust in the abstract. You need also to have a certain common view on the kind of social model you are aiming at. So you cannot have something like, we trust each other's social fabric in the abstract. No, we trust each other's capacity to work towards a kind of social model. Now, let me maybe give a Belgian example, because I'm in the preparation that you were interested in Belgium. Belgium obviously is a kind of a laboratory for the European problem. And because I'm very Belgo-Belgian, I'm absolutely obsessed by North-South divisions. Just from my personal experience on trust and how you build that. As a matter of fact, in this country, as some of you may know, the North-South divide is very important, and it has often a very perverse political dynamic. We were, in the 90s, absolute laggards. We were doing very badly on activation of unemployed people. We did very badly. So we were not implementing all those nice European ideas of the European employment strategy. We were not doing that. It was also a very politically sensitive issue because Flemish people, so of the north of the country, Flemish people like me, we thought in general that we were starting activation with unemployed people in Flanders, but those bloody Walloons, they simply did not do that. They simply did not do that. And Brussels certainly not. And so we were pushing our unemployed people to work, and they were not doing it. And they were kind of gaming the system because unemployment insurance is funded at the level of the kingdom by Flemish taxpayers. So this was the political dynamic. I happened to be Minister of Employment in the 2000s in the Verhofstadt government. And then we made a decisive change, I would say. And I was a bit instrumental in that, and it kind of made my reputation. I said, okay, we absolutely must get a thorough activation policy, both in the north and the south. This country will not survive if we are not able to solve that problem. Now, why do I tell this story? The problem in the Walloon South, I think, was an example of something we also see in Europe. That is, you have vicious circles of belief systems, of ideologies and contexts. Let me explain. In Wallonia, many people, good-meaning people, said, listen, Frank, it's all nice to activate in Flanders. It will not work in Wallonia because we have massive unemployment and demand is simply lacking. So it will not work. I thought they were wrong on this, but it was a belief system in a context. And it's kind of a vicious circle because it seemed to prove itself. And then I said, okay, no, let's organize a common framework and we will give you some support also. We will organize a common framework with kind of minimum requirements on activation you should pursue in Wallonia, in Brussels and in Flanders. We negotiated 2 years on that, 2 years negotiation, also with social partners. We agreed a system of minimum requirements for activation after a long, long discussion, which was a bit of, I must say, a bit of an overstretch of federal powers. But then, okay, they agreed in Wallonia and Brussels, they started to activate, and I think they are doing an exemplary job today. They are doing an exemplary job today. And then in the next move, we completely decentralized this competence of activation, because there was sufficient trust to do that, I would say. So, why am I telling that story? Because I think obviously, both in the north and the south, you have this kind of vicious circles of belief systems and contexts. So in Germany, they believe that their view on rule-based policy making is the good view, because things are going fine in Germany. And in the south, I think many people, like in the Belgian south, will say, well, nothing of all that is working. Labor market reform, not working. Activation, not working. Why would we do that? And indeed, it is not working at this moment. So it's kind of a vicious circle. How can you break that? You can only break it politically. You must jump to a different situation where you simultaneously pool some sovereignty, like this minimum requirements on activation in Belgium. You pool some sovereignty, you agree on a certain policy and you say, this is what we will do. But simultaneously you organize sufficient solidarity and you give sufficient time to make it deliver. And then you can change these perverse belief systems and these divides in the mind, I would say. I'm not saying that this country is saved, that this is solving everything. We have a very important nationalist push in Flanders. I don't like that. But this is my experience, and it sets my mind also when I think about the EU.
Okay, that's very interesting. So you're telling me that the ingredients are a little bit of overstretch from Brussels, in this case, combined with talking a lot to each other, and then give it time to show it works.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. Please take notes. We're going to have to do something about it. Okay, I move to the next question, which is also very much related to trust. Because we had the feeling lately that, you have all these recommendations from Brussels. Every country has to do its own works and then show that it can perform well in this, do this reform, do that reform. And sometimes, well, often actually, all these recommendations lead to very disappointing results. And I think one explanation for that is that in the periphery, but especially in the south, I have to say, and maybe somewhere also in the east of Europe, the state is simply less capable of delivering. And you can see this already if you look inside Italy, between the north and the south of Italy, where the quality of institutions is poorer in the south. So there is a problem of capacity building where perhaps Europe failed in the past couple of decades. So I wonder, what can we do to restart this? What can the EU do to improve the quality of the institutions? Because that would be the key, perhaps, to also contribute to this trust that we want to build.
Maybe the honest answer is not so much. But let me come back to my previous point on the Belgian experience. Maybe some people would have said that the problem, let's say from the northern Belgian perspective, looking critically at the south of Belgium, some people would have said, yeah, this is a lack of capacity for governance. Whilst I would say, no, it's a belief system. They simply don't believe in activation and in labor market reform, and they are in a context that reinforces their belief. So it's less their fundamental incapacity. And so I'm not sure, and I mean what I say, I don't know to what extent there is something intrinsically problematic with governance in a number of countries, or there is more kind of a political stalemate. I don't know. Certainly governance is an issue, but not only in the south of the Eurozone. I would say governance is certainly an issue if you go to Romania. Why don't we see a kind of nice catching up in countries like Romania and other countries? That is governance that is lacking. And I have no clear answer, except that obviously a number of the things that have been said about the use of the funds and the way we should follow up the funds are linked to that. But I dare not say very much about that.
Okay, thanks. But it's a good answer, even the point that maybe there's no problem. at least within the Eurozone.
Yeah.
In the EU in general, maybe yes. I think that if we look at the situation now, another important issue is the issue of divergence. I think that is an important keyword to analyze the situation today. And it's really scary. I don't know if you ever happen to look at some data where you can see that before 2008, all these variables, important economic variables like interest rate and unemployment rate, they were all going towards a common value. And then after 2008, the trend just departed, like completely split, and then now you have very high unemployment rate in some countries and then 5% in some others. So the issue of divergence, we need to think about it, I think, because what some may think is that this divergence is necessary for Europe to work, for economic growth to be present as a whole on average in Europe. So do you think that is true?
No, I don't think so, and I think that the divergence which we are witnessing, notably within the Eurozone, is politically extremely threatening. And let me simply, first of all, underscore your argument, Ilaria. If you go back in the history of the European project, and if you try to interpret from our perspective today what the fundamental inspiration was of the founding fathers of the European project. I mean, those who negotiated the Rome Treaty in the 50s. If you go back to that inspiration, and you would use our contemporary vocabulary, you would say, well, the founding fathers, the Polaris Pax of this country and other people, the founding fathers thought that economic integration, first of all, simply removing barriers to trade in goods and investment, etc. They thought that economic integration would lead to upward convergence across the members, so those who were lagging behind would catch up in terms of economic prosperity. Just because of economic integration, they would reap the opportunities and catch up. And secondly, they were convinced that within each of the member countries, because of the strength of trade unions, because of aspirations of public opinion, the positive impact of integration, that is this extra growth, so the produce of integration would be redistributed fairly across the population within each of the member states. So they were deeply convinced that supranational economic integration, supranational economic policy would yield both upward